Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Dr. Pradeep Sharma sir, Dr. Grover sir. And before I begin, I would like to thank AIS and Dr. Honavar for making me part of this program, Aishala. So I would straight away begin with the cases presentation. Dr. Jethani has actually made my things simple. Are my slides visible now?
Yes, yes.
Yes, ma'am. You can make it a slideshow, ma'am. Yeah, the top button, ma'am. Down, bottom right, the slideshow button, ma'am.
Actually not visible, I think because of...
Yeah, your cursor may not be visible. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's right.
Perfect.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So I would just take you through three cases which are usually part of the short or spot cases in the exam, because this is mainly a program which is directed to postgraduate students. So these are just three very short kind of cases which do cause a lot of confusion and anxiety in students. So I just try to be more clinically oriented with these cases rather than the management and the surgical part. So this was a first case where a 5-year-old male child presented with the inability to move left eye outwards and inward deviation of the left eye at the same time. His otherwise ocular examination was absolutely normal with the vision normal 6/6 in both eyes, anterior and fundus examination both normal. But if you look at the ocular movement, you can see that he had this small palpebral aperture on the left side, which worsened when he moved his eyes towards the right. That is, on adduction it worsened, and on abduction the palpebral aperture increased. So this is a case where there is a change in palpebral aperture with the limitation of abduction. Now, if you have a case of a limitation of abduction, the three main differential that come into mind are sixth nerve palsy, Duane's retraction syndrome, and infantile esotropia with cross fixation. So how do you differentiate these three? So if you, this is our case where this is the child who has small palpebral aperture and the limitation of abduction. So you can very clearly see that there's a retraction of the globe. So that's number one differentiate, how you will differentiate it from the sixth nerve palsy. The second important differential is the presence of the deviation. So the amount of deviation in sixth nerve palsy is much more as compared to that you can see in the cases of Duane's retraction syndrome. So even though the limitation is say around -2, in this case, the amount of deviation is not so much. It could be hardly around 15 degrees or maybe even less than that. But in this case, in the case which is shown down, you can see that there is a significant amount of limitation of abduction in the right eye, as well as the amount of deviation is pretty large, which may be as good as more than 60 prisms. So this is one very important differential that you have to keep in mind. The other differential that is a very subtle sign, but if observed carefully can be picked up, is the size of the palpebral aperture. So because this is a paralytic muscle, the size of the palpebral aperture is more in case of paralytic muscle. While since this is a restrictive squint, the size of palpebral aperture is less. So that's a very soft sign, but yes, can be picked up. The next common mistake what postgraduate students generally do is to examine a case of infantile esotropia with cross fixation, and they find that there is a limitation of abduction, which is actually due to the cross fixation of the for the child. So it's better to do check for the adduction movements after checking for the version movement. So once you cover the fixing eye, look for the abduction. And now in this case that the abduction has become full. So now we clearly know that this probably is a case of Duane's retraction syndrome. The basic pathophysiology of Duane's retraction syndrome is the absence of deficiency of sixth nerve innervation to the lateral rectus muscle. Instead, the lateral rectus muscle gets innervation from an aberrant branch of third nerve. And that is the reason why when the patient looks in adducted position, both MR and LR are firing simultaneously, which leads to the retraction of the eyeball inside the eye, as well as other clinical features like upshoots and downshoots. So what are the indications of surgery in this case? First indication is to maintain the binocularity if there is a presence of squint in primary position. The second indication could be a head posture, to correct the head posture. The other important indication is the cosmetic, because sometimes these upshoots, the retractions are very cosmetically very troublesome. So you have to correct this and give whatever best possible cosmesis to the patient. So there are numerous surgeries that can be done, but the idea that has to be kept in mind whenever one is operating a case of DRS is that we have to weaken the LR, or because it is receiving the aberrant regeneration from the third nerve, but not strengthen it. So there is no indication for strengthening the LR in this case, because it may otherwise worsen the retraction. So coming to case 2, so this was a 16-year-old male who complained of upward deviation of left eye with the presence of right head tilt. Now these are the ocular movements of this patient. You can see that the left eye is the hypertropic eye, which on the dextroversion is there is an inferior oblique overaction. So you know that this probably is an inferior oblique overaction, or you have to differentiate whether there is a superior oblique underaction. So whenever you have these kind of vertical deviations, the best test to differentiate the various muscle paralysis is to do a Parkes 3 test step. One has to note that Parkes 3-step test is specifically for cyclovertical deviation and is positive only during the acute stages. Once there is a spread of comitance, maybe this test may not be so specific. So the first step is to look at the primary gaze, where you have to know which eye is hypertropic. So in this case, the left eye is hypertropic, which suggests that probably there is either a right superior rectus or right inferior oblique underaction, or there is left superior oblique or left inferior rectus underaction. The next step is to look at the secondary gazes, where you will find that the hypertropia is now increasing on the dextroversion. So out of 2 muscles, now we have zeroed down to 4 muscles. Now we have zeroed down to 2 muscles. So because the hypertropia is increasing in dextroversion, we have now zeroed down to 2 muscles which act during this gaze are right superior rectus and left superior oblique. So after you have zeroed down to 2 muscles, the next step is to do a head tilt test, and you will notice that on the left head tilt, the amount of hypertropia is increasing, while on the right head tilt, it is same or less than in primary position. So this is a sign that tells us that this is the left superior oblique which is underacting, because the superior rectus of the left eye has to overact to compensate for the intorsion due to the left superior oblique palsy. So this is a clear-cut case of left superior oblique palsy, and we should also look for the torsion in such cases, where in cases of a normal case, you can have the fovea, which is placed normally between the line passing from the inferior pole of the disc and the line passing from the middle of the disc. While in presence of intorsion, you can have fovea which is displaced upwards and upwards to the line that passes from the middle of the disc. So always check for the torsion. Why is it important to check for the torsion? Is that we should not miss the bilateral superior oblique palsy, which is seen especially after the head trauma. So in these cases, the vertical deviation is not so much. There is minimal vertical deviation, and in either gazes the hypertropia increases. But what is characteristic is that head tilt is positive on both the sides, and the amount of torsion is much more than 10 degrees. So you can classify superior oblique palsies. It has been classified by NAPS as class 1, where the maximum deviation is in the direction of inferior oblique. So you have to weaken the inferior oblique. The second type is where the maximum amount of deviation is there in the action of the superior oblique. So one has to strengthen the superior oblique. The third type, where the maximum amount of deviation is on the contralateral side. So you may have to work on both the muscle, the superior oblique as well as inferior oblique. The fourth type, where it is also there in the down gaze as well as on the contralateral side. So one may have to either recess the superior rectus of the same eye or recess the inferior rectus of the other eye. The type 5, where the deviation is exclusively in down gaze, where we may have to strengthen the superior oblique of the same eye as well as recess the superior rectus of the same eye, or we have to weaken the inferior rectus of the contralateral eye. The type 6, as I have just discussed, is bilateral superior oblique palsy and seen in the cases of trauma, where the torsion is more than 15 degrees. 7 is because of the is a Brown syndrome, where you have trauma at the trochlear level. So the deviation, so the presentation is both as Brown syndrome as well as superior oblique palsy. So this is my last case, the third case, where you can see that this was a 26-year-old male who complained of the downward deviation of the right eye. Again, it's a vertical deviation, and you can again look that this vertical deviation is now increasing on the levo version with a downshoot of the right eye. Also notice that there is a limitation of elevation in adduction on the levo version. So this is clearly a case where one has to differentiate whether this is a case of inferior oblique palsy or a Brown syndrome. So in inferior oblique palsy, there is a pattern exotropia because of the superior oblique overaction, while as in Brown syndrome, you may have a divergence in upgaze. Nonetheless, the confirmatory test for Brown syndrome is the FDT, where you want to depress the globe inside the eye, adduct it, and then try to elevate it. So any amount of resistance or any amount of limitation in elevating the eye is suggestive of positive FDT. So the other differential could be monocular elevation deficiency or blowout fracture. So in both the cases, you will have a limitation of elevation both in adduction as well as in abduction, or which may be even worse in abduction as comparison to Brown syndrome, where the elevation is limited more in adduction. So that's the important differential one has to keep in mind. The main cause of the Brown syndrome is various problems at the level of trochlea, or at the level of tendon, or at the level of telescoping of the tendon from the sheath. So you may have a short anterior tendon sheath. You may have an inelastic tendon. The basic thing that whenever the superior oblique acts, the tendon comes out of its sheath, and then it causes it allows the eye to move down. But if the tendon is short or inelastic, it may not be able to come out, and eye may not be able to move. So there may be a problem with the trochlear complex itself. The entry may be small. There may be some kind of restriction. It may be seen in acquired cases also. Whenever there is inflammation or fibrosis at the level of trochlea, you may have the acquired Brown syndrome. The other cause of acquired Brown syndrome could be surgical iatrogenic, where it is secondary to the tucking of the superior oblique muscle, or due to scleral buckling or glaucoma valve surgery. So the main surgical options are weakening of superior oblique, which is really unpredictable and incomplete. It doesn't work very properly. So the best surgical option is the lengthening of the superior oblique tendon, which can either be done through silicone band expander or non-absorbable suture, which can be put in between the tendon as secant suture, or which can be put at the insertion as loop tenotomy. I think with that, I'll finish my case presentation. Thank you.
I think, Dr. Swati, you have done a wonderful job in your limited time, and you have still time to spare, maybe 1.5 minutes. So yeah. I think you have covered 3 interesting cases which are for the examinees to differentiate. And I think you have highlighted the points of differentiation. First of all, in the case of the ESO-DRS, to differentiate from 6th nerve palsy by seeing the ocular deviation difference between the limitation of movement. Secondly, the force duction test, and the narrowing of the palpebral aperture. So these are 3 classical points which will always clarify a case of Duane's retraction, ESO type, from a 6th nerve palsy. You also mentioned about differentiating the cross-fixator infantile esotropia, and that also can be checked by just patching one eye and seeing that the limitation of movement of abduction improves. The second case also highlighted the difference of superior oblique palsy from the primary inferior oblique overactions. And I think you raised the point, which again is a very important step for the examinees to look for a head tilt test, the Parkes head tilt test, and you showed that how it can be easily differentiated. And the third case of Brown syndrome, which many a times can be a sort of problem for many examinees. So you have again picked up a nice case to differentiate it from an inferior oblique palsy, which will have an A pattern, whereas Brown's classically has a divergence in upgaze, limitation of elevation in adduction, whereas the limitation of elevation in abduction is not there. So there is full elevation in abduction and only limitation in adduction is there. And also differentiated from the MEDs and the blowout fractures. So I think you have made your point very clear.